you've got to know the performance of your water filter. A lot of times people call in and we'll ask them, what's the system ratio? What's the flow rate? What's the temperature of the feed water? What's the TDS of the output water of the RO? And almost in every case they go, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. So before we can troubleshoot an RO filter, we have to measure its performance. And that's going to start with looking at the system ratio. Now, to measure the system ratio, I have two beakers of equal size. I know this is a GX400 that we have on the test bench here, and I know it has a ratio of 2 to 1. So that means 2 part drain water to 1 part RO water. So I'm going to turn the system on and let it run. I'm going to let it run until the drain water gets to a readable mark on the beaker, let's say 300 milliliters. If it's a 2 to 1 system, 300 milliliters of drain water, I should have 150 milliliters of RO water. So let's turn it on and see what happens. So on this particular GX400, I have about 850 milliliters of drain water to about 410 milliliters of RO water. So 800 divided by 400 is 2, basically. So it's 2 to 1. The system ratio is correct on this RO. So the next step in measuring a reverse osmosis system is measuring the gallon per day flow rate, or the gallon per minute flow rate. So let's measure this thing and see if it's putting out the proper flow rate. So I'm going to turn the water pressure on, and I'm going to start a stopwatch, and I'm going to measure the flow rate over a minute's time. I'm going to take the measurement in milliliters because the flow rate is so small on these small RO units. I'm going to convert that to gallons per day, and then we're going to see how many gallons per day this RO is flowing. So I know this is rated at 400 gallons per day. So I'm going to need a stopwatch for this. So I'm going to let this run for 1 minute. So I'm going to turn my water on and start my stopwatch at the same time. Or I'm going to start my stopwatch when I see permeate water flowing. Whatever happens first. Okay, go. So there's 10 seconds left. At the end, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, pull it. It takes a little bit for the RO to shut off, so I pulled the tube. Now I'm using a beaker. You could measure this in a measuring cup at home that you have in the kitchen, a graduated cylinder you may have in the grow room. Something with objective measurement marks on the side is imperative. Okay, so I am reading about 960 milliliters in a minute. I'm going to write that down. Now to convert to gallons per day, I take my 960 milliliters a minute and multiply it by 0.38. That gets me 364.80. So this filter is flowing 364.8 gallons a day. Let's round it up to 365 gallons per day. I can write that down as my flow rate. 365 gallons per day. Now I need to know at what pressure it's flowing at too. So I can turn my RO on and see what pressure it's running at. Okay, I'm running at 52 psi. I can shut my RO off now. So I'm going to write that down. 365 gallons per day at 52 psi. Then I can reference the flow chart that's on GrowoniX.com. It's on the product page of a GX200. You can also find it in the text section as well. And I'm going to see if 365 gallons a day at 52 psi is along that flow chart to see if my filter is performing as it should. Now I move on to the next step, which is taking the water temperature and the TDS reading. To take my water temperature, I'm just going to use my ppm pen and put it in my glass of RO water. And it takes a second to get a reading. It's not only going to read the TDS, it's also going to read the temperature. .4 ppm, 78.7 degrees. Okay, so I write that down. My water temperature is 78.7, just round it up to 79 degrees. That's some warm water, by the way. And the TDS was 20.4, so we'll just call it 20 ppm. Okay, so now I have my system ratio calculated, 2 to 1. The gallon per day measurement, 365 gallons a day at 52 psi. The water temp and TDS, 79 degrees at 20 ppm. And now I have enough information to reference the flow rate chart, which you can find in the catalog, you can find on the side of the box, you can find on the website on the product page, and you can find also here in the text section. And I look at the GX400 line at 77 degrees. Well, that's the warmest temperature line we have on the flow rate chart. We're actually 79 degrees. So we can expect the flow rate to be even higher, but I'm going to follow the 77 degree line, and I follow it up, and this should be doing about 300 gallons a day, and it's doing 365 gallons a day right now. That's because the water is really warm, and the ppm is quite low on our feed water as well. So we're getting a ton of flow out of this unit. I would say this unit is not, there's not a low flow condition here. So it's operating right in spec.